at the request of the Iranian regime. That itself is a spectacular absurdity. The same regime whose supreme leader calls for the extermination of Israel and the United States, whose operatives have plotted assassinations of elected leaders, now send its ambassador to cry victim before the Security Council. This week alone, the ambassador of Iran submitted 5 letters within a week, 5 letters, not to condemn terrorism, not to announce it is dismantling its nuclear program, but to seek sympathy for a regime that funds, arms, and orchestrates terror across the globe. Iran is not under attack. Iran is being stopped. On Wednesday evening, it launched a ballistic missile directly at Soroka Hospital in Beersheba, in the southern part of Israel. It is the largest hospital in the region. Soroka Hospital serves more than 1 million civilians of all backgrounds. This was a war crime, deliberate, indiscriminate, and barbaric. Israel's actions have been precise and compliant with international law. Our targets are military. Our objective is clear: to dismantle the Iranian regime's genocidal capabilities before it is too late. Let there be no misunderstanding. That is not just Israel's fight. This fight is for everyone across the world. Iranian missiles can already reach parts of Europe, and soon they could reach the eastern shores of the US. Iran's terror network extends to every continent, from criminal networks in South America to undercover agents in many European capitals to extremists in the Middle East and Africa. Today, when I walk into the Security Council, I don't expect gratitude from the Security Council, but I will not apologize for protecting our people and for confronting evil when others will not. Thank you.
Ambassador, with China Central Television, we know that there are diplomatic efforts ongoing in Geneva. What is Israel's position on these diplomatic talks that might get fruits, maybe reach a deal on Iranian nuclear issue?
Well, we have seen diplomatic talks for the last few decades, and look at the results. So, if there will be a genuine efforts to dismantle the capabilities of Iran, then that's something we can consider. But it is going to be like another session and debates. That's not going to work.
But last few decades, the Prime Minister Netanyahu always said there would be only months, weeks, days away from Iranian getting nuclear weapons, which is not true.
No, so I beg to differ with you. You're going to listen to the IEA later on today. Once we found out about their intentions and that they are building the capabilities, we decided to act. We decided not to wait for them to be the first one to launch atomic bomb into Israel. Please.
Mr. Ambassador, Mariam Ramadi with Iran International. The IAEA and especially Mr. Grossi before said they don't have any evidence that the Islamic Republic of Iran is acquiring a nuclear weapon. What kind of evidence does Israel have that Iran is going after a nuclear weapon or nuclear bomb? And did you share those evidence with the IAEA? And also, my second question, in Iran, people don't have access to internet, complete blackout. They don't get Israeli evacuation notice. And before you gave, the Israeli government and the army gave notice to the people of Iran, but there wasn't enough time for people to evacuate. How do you make sure that people are not in the places that Israel is targeting so you can make sure that civilians don't get killed?
So first, regarding your first question, the IAEA itself said that Iran enriched uranium to a level that they can produce multiple bombs, not one bomb. And it's not for civilian usage, it's for the military program. We know about the ballistic missiles, we see their capabilities, they are launching them every night into Israel. And we also found out about the triggering mechanism and about the intention to put everything together. So when you take the enriched uranium, the ballistic missiles, the triggering mechanism, and you understand that now they are at a point that they wanted to put everything together, that was point we decided not to wait anymore. Regarding your second question, we pray for the people of Iran. We care about them. That's why we send those notifications, and we will do our best to minimize civilian casualties. And if they don't have access to our warnings, I would advise them not to stay near military facilities. They know exactly where the IRGC compounds are. They know exactly where the nuclear reactors are. So my advice to them, and we do care for them, is to not to be next to those facilities.
Yes, sir. Chris Reyes with Canadian Broadcasting. Are you in support of the United States negotiating with Iran? If not, what is your message to the U.S.? And if you are in support of those negotiations, what would you like to see come out of that deal?
So as I said earlier, we look at results. And if there will be results that will bring us the security that we need, which means they don't have the capabilities. And the Iranians are the masters of deceptions. They lied for so many years, so we cannot just play the game with them anymore. If it will be like, what happened in Libya, when you had real inspectors who came into Libya, took out everything out, that's a mechanism that can be discussed. But if it's going to be just another round of talks, that's something which we cannot accept.
Ambassador, can I follow up?
Well, last question, please, yeah.
You mentioned, but the director last night said the following: we do not have any indication that there is a systematic program in Iran to produce a nuclear weapon. We know the US estimate back in March saying there is no such thing, stopped in 2003. I just want to emphasize, are you going to share this information that you have, that they were about to dash to a bomb, with the US, with the public?
So the Director General of the IAEA will speak in a minute in the Security Council. I would advise you to ask him that the amount of uranium that was enriched already in Iran, if it serves civilian usage or a military program. Let him answer that question. We have the information, we have the intelligence that Iran built a military program, not a civilian one, which was not supervised by the IAEA. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Excellencies, distinguished colleagues, I hereby declare open the 10th meeting of the 59th session of the Human Rights Council. Excellencies, distinguished colleagues, I now have the honor to give the floor to His Excellency Mr. Saeed Abbas Araghchi, Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Islamic Republic of Iran. You have the floor, Excellency. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Mr. President, distinguished delegates, I am Sayyid Abbas Araghchi, Foreign Minister of Iran, a peace-loving nation inheriting one of the most ancient civilizations that has made significant contributions to human civilization, culture, and ethics. Now, this nation of nearly 100 million population is subject to an outrageous act of aggression by a regime that has been committing a horrible genocide in Palestine for the past 2 years, and that is occupying the lands of neighboring countries. Ladies and gentlemen, I stand before this august body to remind you of the legal and ethical responsibility each and every state member and observer of the Human Rights Council has to stand up against this grave injustice. Israel has launched an unprovoked aggression on Iran in stark violation of Article 2, Paragraph 4 of the Charter, and in bold defiance of all the principles and rules that this Council stands for. This is an unjust war imposed on my people since early hours of Friday 13 June, when Israel perpetrated a mix of unlawful and criminal operations against off-duty military personnel, university professors, and ordinary people. Hundreds of my fellow Iranians have been killed and injured following Israel's surprise armed attacks and terrorist operations on residential areas, public infrastructures, hospitals, health centers, and of course, the foreign ministry. Our peaceful nuclear facilities have also been targeted, despite they being under full monitoring of IAEA, and despite the fact that attacking such facilities are absolutely banned under international law. Israeli attacks on nuclear facilities are grave war crimes, given also the danger of environmental and health catastrophe as a result of radiological leakage. Mr. President, Iran, a founding member of the United Nations system, rightfully expects each and every one of you to stand for justice, rule of law, merciless act of aggression. This opinion fact must not be allowed to be twisted upside down by Israel and its actors. Israel aggression of Iran cannot and must not be justified by any legal or moral standards. Any justification for this unjust and criminal law would be tantamount to complicity. Iran is defending itself against the barbaric aggression. We are entitled, tasked, and determined to defend our territorial integrity, national sovereignty, and security with all force. This is our inherent right, and also clearly recognized under Article 51 of the Charter. Dear colleagues, the peace and rule of law are at serious stake as a result of Israel's unlawful invasion of Iran. Israel is committing war crimes and crimes against humanity. International humanitarian law already badly undermined the consequence of Israel's relentless atrocities in occupied Palestine and Israel, which now push another extremely defended as Israel is committing grave violations of 1949 legal conventions. Mr. President, Switzerland is a custodian of the legal conventions and protocols on violation, and has an important responsibility in this job. Indeed, every state party to 1949 convention shall show their daily responsibility under this convention. In particular, honor the monarchy of these conventions. Dear colleagues, we were attacked in the midst of an ongoing diplomatic process. We were supposed to meet in America on 15 June to craft a very promising agreement for peaceful resolution of the issues advocated for our peaceful nuclear program. It was a betrayal of diplomacy and unprecedented blow to the foundation of international law and UNSC. Let me be clear. If there is any use of costly systems and mechanisms we have created for the past 8 decades to preserve human rights and dignity, now is the time to do it. We need action now. Otherwise, the whole human-based international law system will corrode badly. This is a historic moment for human civilization, and the civilized nation has come under unjust war aggression. The world, every state, every mechanism and body has to be alarmed and has to act now to stop aggression, to end impunity and to hold the criminals
would like to thank the Secretary General, USG De Carlo, and Director General Grossi for your remarks. Madam President, before I begin my remarks, I must address the representative of the Islamic regime in Iran, Mr. Iravani. How dare you? How dare you write 5 letters in the last week, come before this council, demand a session, and ask the international community for sympathy? How dare you ask the international community to protect you from the consequences of your own genocidal agenda? Have you no shame? For years, your supreme leader, Ayatollah Khamenei, has publicly and repeatedly called for the destruction of Israel and the United States. In May 2024, he declared, and I quote, "The divine promise to eliminate the Zionist entity will be fulfilled." In May 2025, he said, and I quote, "The Zionist regime that is a lethal, dangerous, cancerous tumor should certainly be eradicated, and it will be." These statements are your regime's policies. Your government has attempted the assassination of Prime Minister Netanyahu. It attempted the assassination of President Trump. Your operatives have plotted to attack Jewish communities and kill Israeli civilians across the world. Now, with innocent blood still dripping from your hands, you come here asking for sympathy. You demand protection from this council while plotting the extermination of my people. It's enough. Enough with the performances. Enough with the theater. How can this council allow the representative of a regime that funds, arms, and orchestrates terror across the world to come here and play victim? It's like a wolf complaining when the shepherd fights back to protect his flock. So innocent. Mr. Iravani, please clarify to us. Do you support the destruction of Israel, a UN member state? Do you support the assassination of our elected leaders? If you do not, say so. We are all here, waiting. This council should put an end to this charade, once and for all. Mr. Iravani, you are not a victim. You are not even a diplomat. You are a wolf pretending to be a diplomat. And we are done pretending otherwise. Madam President, on Wednesday night, Iran launched a ballistic missile directly at a hospital. And by the way, I listened to your word. You mentioned that we attacked hospitals. I ask you to provide a list of the hospitals that Israel attacked in Iran. We know what we are doing. If we attacked hospitals, show us the locations, show us the names and the list. Iran launched a ballistic missile directly at a hospital, Soroka Medical Center in Beersheba, the largest hospital in southern Israel. It was struck by a precision-guided missile fired by the Islamic Republic of Iran. This hospital serves over 1 million people, Jews, Muslims, Christians, Druze, Bedouin. It is a vital provider of emergency and trauma care. Iran hit it in purpose. There was no military bases around, no mistakes, leaving those million people with severely reduced access to medical service. This was not a misfire. This was not a mistake. Iran has proven its ability to strike strategic targets with accuracy. This was a deliberate act. It is a blatant violation of international law, a war crime, and a calculated attempt to murder the most vulnerable. Let this Council understand what that missile really signified. That no one is safe. That if Iran will target a hospital with a ballistic missile, it will target anyone, anywhere, with anything they have. Today it was Beersheba. Tomorrow it could be Brussels. Soon it could be Boston. Iran is rapidly expanding its ballistic missile arsenal. Today its longest range missiles can travel over 2,000 kilometers. That already puts Eastern Europe in range. But Iran is not stopping there. Iran is developing missiles with a range of over 4,000 kilometers. That would place every European capital, London, Paris, Berlin, Rome, within striking distance. And when that milestone reaches, what comes next? New York, Washington, the US entire East Coast. Before Israel took action, that reality was approaching faster than you could imagine. Council members, do you believe that such a regime will hesitate to threaten entire populations with nuclear armed missiles? Can you guarantee? Especially a regime which chants death to America, death to England, death to Israel, and so many others. Because that is where the world was heading. Israel is stopping it. Iran has already enriched uranium to near weapons-grade levels. It cannot be denied. We saw the reports. It has built deep underground facilities designed to survive bunker-busting bombs. It has advanced missile delivery systems. And it has lied to the IAEA and the world at every step. There must finally be an acknowledgement that there is no greater threat to international peace and security than a nuclear Iran. The Soroka strike of our hospital should end any illusion that this threat is theoretical. Iran is not just building the capability, it is using it. We will never allow those capabilities to go nuclear. While the Ayatollah shout death to America and death to Israel, many on this council dismiss those threats. While Iranian missiles fly, the UN urges restraint and de-escalation while ignoring Iran's nuclear ambitions altogether. That weakness, that detachment from reality, that hypocrisy is what allowed Iran to get as far in its nuclear program as it did. It is what allowed Iran to sow chaos across the world. And let's analyze it for a minute. The Iranian regime has exported thousands of drones which have killed many civilians. It has harmed Hezbollah in Lebanon, Hamas in Gaza, the Houthis in Yemen, Shiite militias in Iraq, extremist groups in Syria and Africa, and criminal networks in Latin America and Europe. It's a war machine, stretched all around the world. Its reach is not limited by borders, its hatred is not limited by reason, and its ambition is not limited by geography. We have already seen the consequences. Terror attacks in Argentina, Iranian agents uncovered in European capitals, proxy missile strikes on Gulf states. This is Iran's vision for the world, and it's happening in real time. Right now, Israel is the focus point for that murderous vision. Just yesterday, Iran launched another ballistic missile, this time carrying cluster munitions at a densely populated civilian area in central Israel. Cluster munitions are designed to spread multiple explosions over a wide area. It deliberately fired these munitions at civilians. Iran's intentions could not be clearer. Bloody murder. 29 civilians have been killed and almost 900 wounded by Iranian missiles. The only reason the number isn't higher is because of Israel's advanced defensive capabilities. So yes, Israel acted because we understand the cost of waiting. We will not wait for another threat, whether that is rockets, missiles, terrorists, or an atomic bomb. Israel acted as a last resort. This was the final window of opportunity to prevent Iran from acquiring nuclear weapons, and it came only after diplomacy had been exhausted. Israel cannot and will not accept this situation. Operation Rising Lion was launched to neutralize an imminent and existential threat, and we are doing so in full compliance with international law. Israel is strictly following the law of armed conflict, including the rules of distinction, proportionality, and precautions in attacks. That's why I'm waiting for the report about the hospitals. Our strikes are aimed at military objectives based on reliable intelligence. Every measure is taken to minimize harm to civilians. Iran launches indiscriminate barbaric missile attacks. They deliberately target population centers. This is the difference between a democracy acting in defense of its people and a brutal regime targeting civilians. Colleagues, it is Israeli civilians running for shelter now, every day. But something many of you also seem not to understand is that when Israel acts, we are not only defending our people, we are defending yours. As German Chancellor Merz said, and I quote, Israel is doing the world's dirty work. We are the first target, but we will not be the last. We are holding the line between civilization and genocidal jihadist imperialism. Iran doesn't just want to destroy Israel. It wants to remake the world order. One missile, one terror proxy, one destroyed hospital at a time. So no, we do not apologize for defending ourselves. We do not apologize for striking Iran's nuclear facilities. We do not apologize for neutralizing the threat. Because while some here raise their voices when Israel strikes a ballistic missile site, they fall silent when Iran strikes a surgical wound. Some condemn us for destroying a drone factory, but say nothing when Iran hits a residential building. That is not balance. That is moral collapse. We are doing what this council should have done long ago. We are acting where the international community hesitated. We are stopping a threat that endangered the entire world. Though our homes, our families, and our children are under threat, we will not stop. Not until Iran's nuclear threat is dismantled. Not until its war machine is disarmed. Not until our people and yours are safe. This is not just Israel's fight. It is the world's fight, and if no one else will fight it, we will. Thank you, Madam President.
I thank the representative of Israel for his statement. I wish to take this opportunity to remind all speakers that this is a formal meeting of the Council, and as such, the need to ensure the proper decorum and proper language. We should always aim to refrain from personal attacks. I now give the floor to the representative of Iraq.
شكرا جزيلا السيدة الرئيس.
Thank you, Madam President. We express our appreciation for the presence of the Secretary General and for calling to contain this crisis and his call for return to renegotiations and his awareness of its consequences. We also
meeting at our request. We welcome the presence of the Secretary General and in this meeting, and thanks for his introductory remarks. We also extend our gratitude to Under-Secretary General Ms. DiCarlo for her valuable briefing. We thank Algeria, Pakistan, China, and the Russian Federation for supporting this meeting and for their clear condemnation of Israeli brutal attacks. Madam President, on 13 June, Israel launched a large-scale, unprovoked military attack against the Islamic Republic of Iran. Civilian cities, including Tehran, Isfahan, Shiraz, Tabriz, and Kermanshah, were deliberately targeted. The strikes were planned and systematic, killing senior military officials, scientists, professors, students, doctors, artists, athletes, rescuers, and ordinary civilians, including women, children, and infants. Many died in their sleep. These children killed in their bed. Hundreds of civilians have been killed and thousands injured. The aggression continues. On 16 June, Israel attacked Hakim Children's Hospital in Tehran, Farabi Rehabilitation Hospital in Kermanshah, and Iranian Red Crescent Society building and medical ambulances. These are only a few instances of the brutality and gross violation of international humanitarian law by Israeli regime. At least 2 pregnant women and their unborn children were killed. On the same day, Israel struck the national broadcasters AH1B during a live broadcast, killing journalists and humanitarian workers. Just today, Israeli regime inflicted damage to 2 other hospitals in Iran, endangering the lives of patients and medical personnel. Up till now, 5 hospitals have suffered from heinous attack of Israeli regime, along with physicians and humanitarian personnel who have been killed or injured. There were not accidents, there were not collateral damage, they were deliberated war crimes, acts of a state terror, and example of barbaric warfare. Madam President, Excellencies, and colleagues, Israel also attacked Iran's peaceful safeguard nuclear site and facilities. On 13 June, it struck the uranium conversion facility and the fuel plate fabrication plant. On 18 June, it targeted centrifuge production sites in Tehran and Karaj, both under IAEA monitoring. On the 19th June, it attacked the Arak heavy water reactor built under the JCPOA terms and IAEA safeguard with no proliferation risk. These attacks violate the UN Charter, international law, the IAEA Statute, and Security Council Resolution 2231 and 487. Israeli strikes are an assault on the global non-proliferation regime. Security Council Resolution 487, which was adopted unanimously, clearly states that any military attack on the safeguard nuclear facilities is an attack on the entire IAEA safeguard system and the NPT itself. The Security Council must implement its resolution. If the Council fails to act now, it will send a message that international law and resolution apply selectively. If the non-proliferation regime collapses, this Council will share responsibility with the Israeli regime. Madam President, despite Iran's repeated warning about the threats of our peaceful nuclear sites and facilities, the IAEA Director General has failed to act. His silence undermines the agency authority, neutrality, and credibility. The IAEA cannot remain silent while safeguard facilities are attacked. This inaction must end. Israel openly declared that it will continue this strike for as many days as it takes. We are alarmed by credible report that the United States, as a depository of NPT, may be joining this war. Any such support violates the NPT and undermines global security. The selective invocation of international law by US, France, using it when convenient, discarding it when it constrained their allies, is a form of institutional hypocrisy that gravely undermines the credibility of this Council and the international law. Let me clear, Iran's nuclear program is peaceful and under the world's most extensive IAEA inspections. Iran has long advocated for a nuclear weapon-free zone in the Middle East. Israel is the only possessor of undeclared nuclear weapon in the region. It refused to accede to the NPT and blocked regional disarmament efforts. Madam President, Israeli aggression violates the UN Charter. It breached the basic principle of prohibition of the use of force. It violates Iran's sovereignty and territorial integrity. It violates international human rights law and targets innocent civilians and threatens the right of life and security of our people. This regime committed war crimes, crimes against humanity and state terrorism. It attacks on safeguard nuclear facilities, set a dangerous precedent for global security. Madam President, the already dire situation has been exacerbated by mounting and irrefutable evidence of direct involvement by the United States in this illegal war of aggression. The US has publicly threatened to strike Iran's safeguard nuclear facilities. Such acts constitute a flagrant violation of Article 2, Paragraph 4 of the UN Charter and a breach of the sovereign equality of states. These reckless statements and actions emanate from the head of a state who is a permanent member of this Council and entrusted with primary responsibility for international peace and security, and an irresponsible behavior. Madam President, Iran has exercised its inherent right to self-defense under Article 51 of the UN Charter. Our response has complied fully with international law, including humanitarian law. We have taken all necessary precautions to protect civilians. Iran will continue to exercise this right as long as the Security Council fails to discharge its primary responsibility under the Charter and until the Israeli aggression is fully and unequivocally terminated. The Security Council must act now. We reiterate our call on the Security Council to determine the Israeli illegal use of force and armed attacks against Iran are a breach of peace and act of aggression. Adopt binding and enforcement measures under Chapter 7 to halt the aggression and prevent its recurrence. Condemn clearly the violation of Iran's sovereignty and targeting of our safeguard nuclear facilities. Address the risk of wider regional war, especially the unlawful involvement of a third country. Madam President, the lies and fabrication used by representatives of Israeli regime and its Western allies don't work anymore to whitewash and justify its horrendous crimes. International law is clear. There is no right for Israel to commit this act of aggression, no right to attack and target civilian infrastructure or safeguard nuclear facilities, no legal or moral cover for war crimes. The so-called preemptive attack and existential threat claims used by this terrorist regime and its allies to justify aggression have no basis in international law, and to conduct acts of aggression, kill innocent people, and violate the territorial integrity of states. These are false excuses for Israeli aggression. Iran has never initiated any war, while Israel, as an occupying and terrorist regime, has a long and dark history of illegal use of force, violation of all legal international norms, assassination, and nuclear secrecy that destabilize the entire region. The selective use of international law by certain members of this Council expose dangerous double standards that endanger international peace and security and undermine the credibility of this body. Without the support and protection of certain Western states, especially the United States, Israel could not have been able to commit this aggression with such impunity. This complicity must be recorded by history. Finally, Madam President, Council's failure to act at this critical juncture would constitute a profound abdication of the Council's responsibilities and a grave betrayal of fundamental principles of the United Nations. Inaction will embolden the aggressor, undermine international law, and send a message of dangerous impunity to the world. Thank you, Madam President.
I thank the representative of the Islamic Republic of Iran for his statement, and I give the floor now to the representative of Israel.
Madam President, I would like to thank the Secretary General, USG De Carlo, and Director General Grossi for your remarks. Madam President, before I begin my remarks, I must address the representative of the Islamic regime in Iran, Mr. Iravani. How dare you? How dare you write 5 letters?
The Security Council will now begin its consideration of item 2 of the agenda. I wish to warmly welcome the Secretary General, His Excellency Mr. Antonio Guterres, and I give him the floor.
Madam President, allow me to make a brief introduction before the briefings of my colleagues. Excellencies, there are moments when the choices before us are not just consequential, they are defining. Moments when the direction taken will shape not only the fate of nations, but potentially our collective future. This is such a moment. To the parties to the conflict, the potential parties to the conflict, and to the Security Council as the representative of the international community, I have a simple and clear message. Give peace a chance. The confrontation between Israel and Iran is escalating rapidly with a terrible toll, killing and injuring civilians, devastating homes, neighborhoods, and civilian infrastructure, and attacking nuclear facilities. The world is watching with growing alarm. We are not drifting toward crisis. We are racing toward it. We are not witnessing isolated incidents. We are on course to potential chaos. The expansion of this conflict could ignite a fire that no one can control. We must not let that happen. Excellencies, it may be easy to list a range of problems that have impacted relations between Israel and Iran in the last decades. But the central question of this conflict is the nuclear question. Non-proliferation is a must for the safety and security of us all. The Non-Proliferation Treaty is a cornerstone of international security. Iran must respect it. And Iran has repeatedly stated that it is not seeking nuclear weapons. But let's recognize there is a trust gap. The only way to bridge that gap is through diplomacy to establish a credible, comprehensible, and verifiable solution, including full access to inspectors of the IAEA as the United Nations technical agency in this field. For all of that to be possible, I appeal for an end to the fighting and the return to serious negotiations. At this defining moment, I urge this Council to act with unity and urgency for dialogue. And I urge the international community to rally behind the sole path that can deliver lasting peace, diplomacy, grounded in international law, including the UN Charter. This is even more crucial given the unfolding horrors in Gaza. Excellencies, The only thing that is predictable is that the consequences of continuing this conflict are unpredictable. Let us not look back on this decisive moment with regret. Let us act responsibly and together to pull the region and our world back from the brink. Thank you.
I thank the Secretary General for his remarks. I now give the floor to Ms. Rosemarie DiCarlo.
Thank you, Madam President. We meet as the scope and scale of attacks in Iran and Israel continue to widen, with grave consequences for civilians in both countries. In Iran, Israel claims to have targeted over 100 military sites and nuclear facilities, including the Kermanshah.
Thank you, Madam President. I would like to thank Secretary General Guterres for his presence and thoughtful and compelling remarks. Secretary General, you spoke about a defining moment and our collective future, as well as collective responsibility. And we fully agree with you and your call to give peace a chance. And in that context, your appeal to end the fighting and return to negotiations. I'm also thankful to Undersecretary General DiCarlo for her complimentary briefing, as well as the briefing by Director General Grossi. We note in particular his view that diplomatic solution is within reach with necessary political will. Madam President, last Friday, the Council had an emergency session in the wake of Israel's military strikes, violating the sovereignty and territorial integrity of Iran in flagrant violation and contravention of the UN Charter and fundamental principles of international law. 1 week later, as a result of such irresponsible behavior, the situation has only exacerbated, with grave implications for regional and international peace and security. Pakistan strongly condemns the unjustified and illegitimate aggression by Israel. We stand in solidarity with the people of Iran. We unequivocally denounce the blatant attacks and military strikes carried out by Israel, which constitute a grave danger and a serious threat to the peace, security, and stability of the entire region and beyond, with serious implications. We offer our sincere condolences and sympathies to the brotherly people of Iran on the loss of life as a result of these unprovoked attacks. The ensuing humanitarian crisis and civilian toll on both sides is also deplorable. International humanitarian law must be complied by all sides. The attacks against nuclear facilities for peaceful purposes are deeply troubling. Such attacks contravene international law, the Charter of the UN, Statute of the IAEA, and relevant IAEA General Conference resolutions on the issue. It is the responsibility of the IAEA to clearly pronounce its legal position with regard to such attacks, as well as to report it to the Board of Governors and to the Security Council about the legal safeguards, safety, and security implications of such attacks. The agency should fulfill that responsibility. Madam President, the latest crisis has aggravated the existing tensions in the region, arising from Israel's continuing ruthless assault on Gaza that has resulted in an unprecedented humanitarian catastrophe for the innocent Palestinians, as well as its recurring violations of international law in Syria, Lebanon, and Yemen. The Security Council bears primary responsibility to immediately stop this wanton aggression and hold the aggressor accountable for its actions. The Security Council must fulfill its duty and affirm the following. First, categorical rejection and condemnation of Israel's attacks on the Islamic Republic of Iran since 13th of June, and all actions that contravene international law and the purposes and principles of the Charter of the United Nations. Second, play its due role to end the hostilities and promote de-escalation for achieving a comprehensive ceasefire before the situation spirals out of control and threatens the peace and stability of the entire region. Third, clear denunciation of the targeting of IAEA safeguarded nuclear facilities against the provisions of international law and the UN Charter as reflected in the UN Security Council resolutions, IAEA resolutions, and international humanitarian law, including the Geneva Conventions. The Security Council must implement its own resolution 487. Fourth, call for dialogue and diplomacy to promote a peaceful and lasting resolution of the crisis. Diplomacy must be given a chance. Madam President, regrettably, Israeli unlawful strikes against Iran came at the time of intense diplomatic engagement on Iran's nuclear issue. These illegal actions must not be allowed to scuttle that dialogue. Parties must swiftly return to the path of negotiations, which is the only viable means to reach a sustainable agreement regarding the Iranian nuclear program. We note the willingness expressed by the United States to keep the door for negotiations open. We also take note of the dialogue between the E3 and Iran. We hope that the diplomatic efforts and engagements will bear fruit. We reaffirm our long-standing position that all issues concerning Iran's nuclear program must be resolved peacefully through dialogue and diplomacy in accordance with the rights, international obligations, and responsibilities of all the parties concerned. At the same time, verification activities by the IAEA as the competent international technical organization mandated to implement respective safeguards obligations should continue unimpeded. The IAEA must continue its work in an impartial and apolitical manner to provide objective reporting and credible information regarding the issues under its purview. Madam President, this is a critical moment. The Security Council must fulfill its responsibility and facilitate peaceful resolution of disputes. Military means and coercion cannot bring about a lasting settlement. Dialogue and diplomacy, in full adherence to the principles of international law and the UN Charter, remain the only viable path to resolving this crisis. This Council must therefore unite in support of the Secretary General's call for end to fighting and return to negotiations and dialogue. I thank you.
I thank the representative of Pakistan for his statement, and I give the floor to the representative of the Russian Federation.
Madam President, we are grateful to the Guianan presidency for the prompt response to the request from Russia, China, Pakistan, and Algeria to convene this meeting. We thank the UN Secretary General for his opening remarks, as well as the Undersecretary General for Political and Peace-Building Affairs.
For us, I thank the Secretary General for his remark and his personal engagement toward peace and stability in the region. And we echo your call for dialogue and for ending the fighting. I also thank USG DiCarlo and Director General Grossi for their briefings. Madam President, Israel's attack against Iran is an unprovoked and unjustified act. It constitutes a flagrant violation of the Charter of the United Nations. This is an attack on nuclear facilities under IAEA safeguard. If these safeguards, if these guarantees, and even the presence on the ground of international inspectors cannot guarantee the protection of such installations, then the credibility of the entire nuclear non-proliferation regime is called into question. If those entrusted with upholding this regime are unable or unwilling to condemn and denounce such violations, they must ask themselves, what is their purpose? And are they truly fulfilling their responsibilities? We must resist any attempt to justify what in essence is an act of aggression against a sovereign member state of the United Nations. Any misleading narrative is unacceptable. As Director General Grossi stated in an interview with CNN, we, the IEA, did not have any proof of a systematic effort to move into a nuclear weapon, end of quote. These words merit our full attention. Madam President, it is imperative that everyone returns to a path of reason. Negotiation between the E3, the European three, and Iran. Negotiation between US and Iran with the facilitation of Oman remain a viable and a constructive option available for diplomacy. Algeria has always believed in the power of dialogue, and we echo the call of the Secretary General in this regard. Even in time of heightening tension, mediation and Charter's principle remain our unique, viable tools. Let me quote the Charter. All members shall settle their international dispute by peaceful means, end of quote. Madam President, international humanitarian law is clear. Nuclear power plant enjoy specific protection and shall not be made the object of attack. Attacks against such facilities are prohibited. If there remains a risk of radioactive material spreading from the impacted facilities, the potential danger extends well beyond borders, endangering civilian populations across the region. For my country, Algeria, there can be no double standard, no double standards when it comes to respecting international humanitarian law. Civilian and civilian infrastructure must be protected everywhere and under all circumstances. We have consistently warned against violation of international humanitarian law, notably in Gaza, where tragically violating IHL became the norm. Today, the same patterns of conduct are being repeated and repeated again. When we reiterate in the strongest term our condemnation of all violation of international humanitarian law, the protection of civilians is not optional. It is an obligation. Upholding international humanitarian law is a matter of preserving our shared humanity. However, those responsible for the collapse of the health system in Gaza, for the killing of 1,580 health workers, for the killing of over 18,000 children and more than 10,000 women, for the killing of 225 journalists, and for the killing of 467 humanitarian workers, cannot credibly claim to be upholding international humanitarian law. Madam President, no measures can substitute for the responsibility that rests with this Council. In 1981, following the Israeli attack on Iraq, remember, this very Council unanimously adopted Resolution 487. It's true, this resolution was never really implemented. And Israel's nuclear facilities were never placed under IAEA safeguards. And Iraq never received any compensation. And the Council, this very Council, was never properly informed of follow-up measures. This is to show that the legacy of impunity, the legacy of immunity, has dangerous consequences. What we are witnessing today is not simply an isolated act of aggression. It is a profound challenge to the very foundations of the international legal order. The Security Council must fulfill its mandate. Acts that threaten international peace and security demand an adequate response. Inaction should not and cannot be an option. I thank you.
I thank the representative of Algeria for his statement, and I give the floor now to the representative of the Republic of Korea.
Thank you, Madam President. At the outset, let me express my gratitude to Guyana for swiftly convening today's meeting at this critical juncture. I thank the Secretary General for his important statement and compelling message. I also appreciate USGT Carlo and IAEA.
Utmost attention to the Secretary General, who forcefully reminded us of the gravity of the current situation, and for this we thank him. I thank the Undersecretary General for Political and Peacebuilding Affairs, Madame Di Carlo, as well as the Director General of the IAEA, Mr. Rafael Grossi for their briefings, which provide us with an assessment of and provides with an overview of the justification for today's meeting. Israeli strikes against Iran have been ongoing for a week. Civilian casualties are multiplying on both sides. Yesterday, one of the largest Israeli hospitals was struck by an Iranian missile. Israeli strikes have also targeted civilian infrastructure that is unrelated to the Iranian nuclear and ballistic program, and information that has been relayed by the Director General of the IAEA vis-a-vis the radiological situation of certain sites is on everybody's minds. There is a need to urgently end these military operations. They harbor grave threats to regional peace and security. France calls for restraint and de-escalation. Civilian lives need to be shielded, and there's a need to re-embark upon the path of diplomacy. Mr. Secretary General stressed that at the heart of this matter lies the nuclear matter. France's position is clear. Iran cannot and must not develop or gain a nuclear weapon. Iran's gaining access to this weapon would generate a threat, first and foremost, for the security of Israel and the entire region, which Iran has been destabilizing for years by delivering its support to armed and terrorist groups. A nuclear Iran would also pose a direct threat to France's and Europe's security interests. This threat is now highly tangible. Hostages of the French state are presently being held in Iran, and Iran has been delivering ballistic missiles and Iranian drones to Russia, and they are being used in its war of aggression against Ukraine. France takes this opportunity to reiterate our call for the immediate release of the two hostages who have been held in Iran over 3 years under unacceptable conditions. Iran gaining access to a nuclear weapon would represent an egregious violation of the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. This would result in a grave weakening of the international non-proliferation regime, of which the treaty is the cornerstone, and this would prompt other states to engage in an arms race in the region and beyond. And yet Iran has opted to engage in a dangerous escalation of its nuclear program, despite calls for it to respect its international commitments. Iran has accumulated a uranium stockpile that largely exceeds the limitations set under the 2015 agreement. It has generated highly enriched uranium at levels which have no justification, no credible civilian justification, and has established thousands of advanced centrifuges going beyond the limitations set out under the 2015 agreement, including sites where such activities are prohibited under the Iranian nuclear agreement and the JCPOA. The Director General of the IAEA, in a report published late May, stated that he is not in a position to guarantee the presence of the peaceful nature of the Iranian program. The Board of Governors of the IAEA observed in a resolution adopted on 12 June that Iran was failing to comply with obligations under the NPT. We are grateful to the IAEA for its unstinting efforts shouldering its oversight and inspection activities despite Iran's obstruction. We respect the ethic of impartiality, independence, and rigorous respect for treaties and their mandate, which the IAEA once again has demonstrated. The goal of the Council needs to be for Iran to resume cooperation with the IAEA, to revert back to compliance with international obligations. A decision by Iran to withdraw from the NPT would be an unprecedented escalation. However, our responsibility vis-a-vis the suffering civilian populations, our commitment to international law, and the memory of the recent crisis in the Middle East requires to act. There can be no military solution to the Iranian nuclear matter. It is through negotiations that a lasting response needs to be sought to the threat of proliferation posed by Iran's nuclear program. This is France's steadfast position alongside our British and German partners. This is the approach which resulted in the adoption of the 2015 Vienna Agreement, whose implementation we have always supported despite the U.S.'s withdrawal in 2018 and despite the cessation of compliance by Iran in 2019. The Europeans of the E3 reverted in 2020 to the dispute settlement mechanism stipulated under the agreement and undertook tireless diplomatic efforts to that end. In 2021, 2022, Iran was proposed a revised agreement that would facilitate the return of the U.S. to the agreement, and Iran would see its full implementation. Iran did not take these opportunities. This year, France, alongside E3 partners, has continuously liaised with Iran, and we hope that these exchanges will bear fruit. In the absence of agreement that reflects our security interests, France, alongside European partners of the E3, as was announced, will shoulder responsibility through the provisions set out under Resolution 2231 of the Security Council. France solemnly calls upon Iran to finally take the chance, the opportunity of a negotiated diplomatic solution. There is still time. Today in Geneva, a meeting of the E3 ministers, of the High Representative of the EU and the Iranian counterpart is being held to that end. As time is ticking, France, together with close European partners, stands ready to immediately initiate diplomatic negotiations with Iran to ensure that Iran will never gain access to the nuclear weapon. And to end this conflict, there's a need to reach agreement on a robust, verifiable, sustained agreement, which is critical to ensure the purely peaceful nature of the Iranian nuclear program. Clear and concrete and tangible commitments need to be shouldered now by Iran to demonstrate to the international community that Tehran hopes to engage upon this path and for rapid results to be achieved. Thank you.
I thank the representative of France for his statement, and I give the floor now to the representative of the United Kingdom.
Thank you, President. And I start by thanking the Secretary-General, Under Secretary-General De Carlo, and Director-General Grossi for your clear and sober briefings. The UK reiterates its full support for the vital work of the IAEA. We thank the IAEA Director-General and his staff for their continued professionalism, diligence, and courage in these complex circumstances. President, first, the United Kingdom is deeply concerned by the sharp escalation we've witnessed between Israel and Iran over the past week. This is a dangerous moment for the entire region, and further escalation is in no one's interest. Civilians must never be targeted, and we deplore the loss of civilian life and offer our condolences. All parties must protect civilians and civilian infrastructure in line with international humanitarian law.
Their professionalism in implementing the agency's critical responsibilities, especially during this complex and evolving situation. Colleagues, we meet at a decisive moment in the Middle East, convening amid an intensifying conflict between Israel and Iran. It is not too late for the government of Iran to do the right thing. President Trump has been clear in recent days that Iran's leadership must completely abandon its nuclear enrichment program and all aspirations of acquiring a nuclear weapon. The Iranian government has long posed a constant menace to the peace and security of its neighbors and the entire world, which this council is charged to maintain. The Iranian government has repeatedly called for Israel's destruction and for, and I quote, death to America. They have launched direct and proxy attacks on Israeli civilians, including most recently on southern Israel's largest hospital, and just recently, in the last couple hours, on Haifa. Israel's government has also spread chaos, terror, and suffering throughout the region. Iran's government has also spread chaos, terror, and suffering throughout the region. Let us not forget that the Iranian government was an enabling and ideological material force behind Hamas's deadly assault on Israel in October 2023. And it twice attacked Israel last year with hundreds of ballistic missiles. The Iranian government also encouraged its terrorist proxy, Hezbollah, to open a northern front from Lebanon and enabled Houthi rebels in Yemen to become a menace to global trade and freedom of navigation, and to launch long-range missiles endangering civilians in Israel. In January 2024, a drone attack from an Iran-backed terrorist group on a U.S. military facility in Jordan killed 3 American service members. Enough is enough. President, as the leaders from the Group of Seven stated earlier this week, Iran is the principal source of instability and terror in the Middle East. The G7 also reaffirmed the right of Israel to defend itself. While the United States was not involved in Israel's strikes, let there be no doubt that the United States continues to stand with Israel and supports its actions against Iran's nuclear ambitions. Iran's leaders could have avoided this conflict had they agreed to a deal that would have prevented them from ever obtaining a nuclear weapon. But they refused to do so, choosing instead to delay and deny. We can no longer ignore that Iran has all that it needs to achieve a nuclear weapon. All it needs is a decision from their supreme leader. That is unacceptable, and this Council must urge them to change course. The government of Iran has nothing to gain by escalating their rhetoric toward the IAEA, launching missiles at civilians, threatening neighbors, or pursuing nuclear weapons. For too long, they have prioritized terrorism and their nuclear program above the well-being of their own people. Their resulting weakness is now on full display for the entire world. The Iranian government must abandon its nuclear ambitions so that there is no more destruction. Choose instead prosperity for their people. Thank you, Madam President.
I thank the representative of the United States for her statement, and I give the floor to the representative of Panama.
Gracias, señora. Thank you, Madam President. We greet and thank the Secretary General of the United Nations, His Excellency Antonio Guterres, for his unambiguous message. During that message, he urged an opportunity to be given to peace. He said, give peace a chance. We also wish to extend our thanks to USG Rosemary DiCarlo, the Director General of the International Atomic Energy Agency, Rafael Grossi. We thank them both for their briefings. We also
thanking the Secretary General, Under Secretary General DiCarlo, and Director General Grossi for your clear and sober briefings. The UK reiterates its full support for the vital work of the IAEA. We thank the IAEA Director General and his staff for their continued professionalism, diligence, and courage in these complex circumstances. President, first, the United Kingdom is deeply concerned by the sharp escalation we've witnessed between Israel and Iran over the past week. This is a dangerous moment for the entire region, and further escalation is in no one's interest. Civilians must never be targeted, and we deplore the loss of civilian life and offer our condolences. All parties must protect civilians and civilian infrastructure in line with international humanitarian law. Restraint is vital to protect further regional escalation and loss of life. The United Kingdom supports Israel's need to protect its security and people. However, a return to diplomacy is urgent, and we have pressed this with both Israel and Iran. I also want to be clear that the UK did not participate and is not participating in Israel's strikes. We have deployed assets, including jets, to the region as a defensive and precautionary measure only. President, second, Iran's nuclear program is a significant concern. My Prime Minister has been clear, Iran must never acquire a nuclear weapon. The IAEA's reports show that Iran's high-enriched uranium stockpile has grown to alarming levels. Iran's stockpile of 60% high-enriched uranium has no credible civilian justification. it is essential that Iran cooperate with the IAEA and bridge the trust gap that the Secretary-General spoke of. The IAEA and the Non-Proliferation Treaty are key pillars of international security. For many years, the UK, alongside our E3 partners, has sought a diplomatic solution to Iran's nuclear program. This commitment stands and has never been more urgent. Alongside E3 colleagues and the EU, we are engaging with Iranian Foreign Minister Arakchi in Geneva today and using this window of opportunity to support a return to diplomacy and a peaceful resolution. Any further escalation, such as restricting IAEA access, diverting nuclear material, or increasing the production of high-enriched uranium, would intensify the threat to international peace and security posed by Iran's nuclear program. Third, military action cannot put an end to Iran's nuclear capabilities. We have strongly supported and continue to support diplomatic efforts to come to a deal. That is the only way to resolve the nuclear issue for the long term. President, our objective remains stability in the Middle East. A diplomatic solution is in the interests of all concerned. Even now, it is not out of reach. Now is the time for restraint, calm, and a return to diplomacy and dialogue. I thank you.
I thank the representative of the United Kingdom for her statement, and I give the floor now to the representative of Slovenia.
Thank you, Madam President. Secretary General, thank you very much for your introductory remarks. USG De Carlo and DG Grossi, thank you very much for your updates and appraisal of the situation on the ground. Madam President, as we heard from the briefers, the situation continues to deteriorate rapidly and risks pushing the region toward the point of no return. We are deeply concerned with the Israeli strikes on Iran, as well as with Iran's retaliatory strikes on Israel. Slovenia condemns its military escalation and the unnecessary loss of civilian lives. We call on both
response to the request from Russia, China, Pakistan, and Algeria to convene this meeting. We thank the UN Secretary General for his opening remarks, as well as the Undersecretary General for Political and Peacebuilding Affairs and the Director of the IAEA for their briefings. Madam President, exactly a week has elapsed since the start of the escalation of the Iran-Israeli conflict, which the Security Council discussed on the 13th of June. In this time, the world has been flooded with images depicting the night skies over Tel Aviv and Tehran and other cities lit up with explosions of tens and hundreds of rockets. The apocalyptic predictions have become a reality. People in both countries have been forced to take shelter in hideouts with each passing day. The list of civilian casualties on both sides lengthens. As a result of the closure of the airspace in the region, many third country civilians have become entrapped and they are striving to find a way home. The Iranian peaceful civilian nuclear facilities continue to be targeted, and this is liable to plunge us into a hitherto unseen nuclear catastrophe. The UN Security Council, the principal body for the maintenance of international peace and security, cannot shirk its responsibility and must provide an objective assessment of the situation and to devise an appropriate solution or decision. We cannot deny the obvious facts. It is indeed Israel which attacked Iran on the eve of the latest planned round of indirect talks between Washington and Tehran. Thereby, West Jerusalem not only demonstrated blatant disregard for the efforts that have been undertaken to seek a diplomatic solution to issues around the Iranian nuclear program, but also demonstrated contempt for its key ally, the United States, which up until recently had been declaring an intent to reach a compromise solution on this matter. It is worth recalling that the Iranian nuclear program is not a scroll secured by 7 seals, indiscernible to the international community. The nuclear facilities and installations in this country are under the safeguards of the IAEA and are continuously subject to scrupulous verification by agency inspectors. Not a single of the member states of this body is under more stringent oversight and scrutiny. Iran has been strictly complying with its obligations under the NPT and the Comprehensive Safeguards Agreement. The Secretariat of the agency's reports have no mention whatsoever about the presence of proliferation risks. So it turns out that Israel has disregarded the assessments of the Specialized International Agency, having on its own authority appointed itself a judge, single-handedly deciding to carry out strikes against a sovereign country with no regard for the UN Charter and international law. Just recently, in the Middle East, a tragic precedent occurred of an invasion into a state under the pretext of alleged presence there of WMDs, which subsequently failed to materialize. It's a pity that the United States, which demonstrated to the entire world this discredited example in 2003, which generated suffering for millions of people, does not wish to learn from its own mistakes. Today, the U.S., yet again, together with the U.K., France, and Germany, is attempting to persuade all parties to believe the groundless fabrications about plans allegedly harbored by Tehran to gain possession of nuclear weapons. Nor can we forget the fact that the attack on Iran was carried out at the time when the entire world observed with horror the ongoing man-made disaster which was unfolding in Gaza and continues to unfold in Gaza, and was condemned the ongoing humanitarian blockade of the Strip and was awaiting the high-level conference in support of the two-state formula under the aegis of the United Nations in accordance with General Assembly resolutions. Instead of reverting back to the sole possible negotiated peaceful settlement in Palestine, Israeli military political leadership raised the stakes and expanded the geography of the conflict in the region. Perhaps the Western Jerusalem's calculations also are to have the new military misadventure detract the international community's attention away from the crimes perpetrated by Tzahal in Gaza and the West Bank. We have seen highly perilous attempts to drag third countries into this confrontation, and this, as was rightly noted by the Secretary General, would have colossal consequences, not just for the stakeholders and the parties engaged, but for the entire region, international peace and security as a whole. We concur with Mr. Guterres' position about the need to avoid internationalization of the conflict. Madam President, the present escalation around Iran did not start yesterday. Having attacked the country, Israel first received a direct pass from a host of Western states. The rhetoric uttered by British, French, and German diplomats in the lofty chambers of the UN Security Council and the IAEA Board of Governors are equally dangerous, just as dangerous as the deadliest weaponry. The blatant blackmail of the leadership of the agency in order to compel it to draft a vague so-called comprehensive assessment on the Iranian nuclear program, pushing through biased anti-Iranian resolutions at the IAEA Board of Governors. All of this made those countries effectively complicit in the Israeli aggression. Let's recall that this specific IAEA report was one of the justifications used by Israeli leadership for the attack on Iraq. What is telling in this connection is a cynical statement from the German Chancellor, Mr. Merz, about, and I quote, Israel doing the dirty work for us. End of quote. The fact that the launch buttons are being pressed by West Jerusalem does not absolve Washington, London, Paris, and Berlin from responsibility for what is taking place. Russia views the ongoing intense Israeli attacks targeting civilian objects in Iran as completely unacceptable and unlawful under international law. As a result of these reckless actions, unacceptable threats are being posed to international peace and security. Nuclear facilities cannot be targeted by strikes. We demand that West Jerusalem immediately cease attacks and raids on Iran, first and foremost the nuclear facilities which are under the protection of the IAEA. We expect that the agency leadership will draft in short order a detailed written report and response to the reports for consideration of the IAEA Board of Governors and the Security Council with a frank assessments of the damage sustained by Iran's nuclear and energy facilities, as well as the safeguards application in that country, including in the context of the presence of inspectors there, inspectors whose lives were under imminent threat. We take note of the clear Iranian statements about its steadfast commitment to obligations under the NPT and the willingness to resume contact with Washington to forge possible solutions that dispel all baseless suspicions and biases vis-à-vis Tehran's nuclear program under the condition that Israeli attacks cease. We support this position. We share the Secretary General's call for an immediate de-escalation resulting in a ceasefire. We firmly believe that a resolution can be provided for in a sustainable way only through diplomacy and negotiations. The goals of nuclear nonproliferation, whose cornerstone is the NPT, cannot and must not be attained through aggression at the cost of innocent lives. We believe that solutions whereby Iran's right to peaceful nuclear activity and Israel's unconditional safety and security will simultaneously be upheld are feasible and attainable. We have conveyed these options to our U.S. and Israeli colleagues as well as Iranian partners. We stand ready to provide them with the necessary assistance in seeking solutions that are acceptable to all. For now, we still have an opportunity to avoid another devastating war that would have unpredictable repercussions for the entire region and world. We stand ready to seek relevant solutions and decisions at the UN Security Council to engage constructively with all parties who genuinely advocate diplomacy and dialogue. Thank you.
I thank the representative of the Russian Federation for his statement, and I give the floor to the representative of Algeria.
Thank you, Madam President. First, I wish to express our appreciation to you for convening this urgent meeting, the second within a week, which underscores the seriousness of the situation before us. I thank the Secretary General.
For those council members who wish to make statements, I give the floor to the representative of China.
Thank you, President. President, I thank you for convening this emergency open meeting. I thank Secretary General Guterres for his statement and support his call for an end to the fighting and the return to diplomatic negotiations. I thank Undersecretary General Di Carlo and Director General Grossi for their briefings. As the Israel-Iran military conflict enters its 8th day, it is distressing to note that it has resulted in a large number of civilian casualties and damage to facilities on both sides. If the conflict escalates further, not only will both sides suffer greater losses, but the regional countries will also be severely affected. Israel's actions violate international law and the norms of international relations, jeopardize sovereignty and security of Iran, and undermine regional peace and stability. China unequivocally condemns this. Chinese President Xi Jinping has put forward a 4-point proposal regarding the current situation. Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi has spoken separately with his counterparts of Iran, Israel, and the regional countries. At this critical juncture, the international community should further forge a consensus and make every effort to promote talks to ease tension. I will make 4 points. First, there must be an immediate ceasefire and an end to fighting. The use of force is not the right way to resolve international disputes. It will only exacerbate hatred and conflicts. The sooner a ceasefire is put in place, the less damage will be done. The situation in the region cannot be allowed to slide into an unknown abyss. The parties to the conflict, Israel in particular, should cease fire as soon as possible to prevent the situation from escalating and to avoid any spillover of the war. Second, the safety of civilians must be ensured. The red line of protecting civilians in armed conflicts must not be crossed at any time, and the indiscriminate use of force is unacceptable. The parties to the conflict must strictly abide by international law, resolutely avoid harming innocent civilians, refrain from attacking civilian facilities, and facilitate the evacuation of third country nationals. Third, we must stay committed to dialogue and negotiation. Communication and dialogue are the right paths to lasting peace. The current conflict has interrupted the negotiation process on the Iranian nuclear issue. The attacks on multiple Iranian nuclear facilities set a dangerous precedent and could have catastrophic consequences. We must not waver in the general direction of a political settlement to the Iranian nuclear issue, and we must persist in returning the Iranian nuclear issue to the track of a political solution through dialogue and negotiation. China welcomes the talk in Geneva among foreign ministers of UK, France, Germany, and the High Representative of EU for Foreign Affairs and Security Policy, and the Foreign Minister of Iran. Fourth, we must bring together the efforts of the international community to promote peace. Without stability in the Middle East, peace in the world would be elusive. The Israel-Iran conflict has led to a sudden escalation of tension in the Middle East and has also had a serious impact on global security. Recently, 21 Arab and Islamic countries issued a joint statement of foreign ministers calling for a ceasefire, resuming talks on the Iranian nuclear issue, and maintaining lasting peace in the region, which China fully supports. The international community, especially major countries with special influence on the parties to the conflict, should make efforts to cool down the situation rather than the opposite. The Security Council, as the primary body responsible for maintaining international peace and security, should play a greater role in this regard. We support the Council in taking necessary actions in a timely fashion. China stands ready to continue to strengthen communication and coordination with all relevant parties, build synergies, uphold justice, and play a constructive role in restoring peace in the Middle East. Thank you, President.
I thank the representative of China for his statement, and I give the floor now to the representative of Pakistan.
Thank you, Madam President. I would like to thank Secretary General Guterres for his presence and thoughtful and compelling remarks. Secretary General, you spoke about a defining moment and our collective future, as well as collective responsibility. And we fully agree with you and your call